At just 15 years old, George Philby was committed to Aylesbury Jail, his young face captured in a stark prison photograph. His crime was minor, the theft of 2 fowls, but it marked the beginning of a long and troubled journey. To the magistrates and gamekeepers who pursued him for decades, he was simply a constant trouble. Yet the records he left behind reveal something far deeper. A man shaped not merely by rebellion, but by the crushing weight of Victorian poverty and class divisions. George was born on the 10th of January 1857, in Wendover, Buckinghamshire, the son of Ephraim Philby, a ploughman, and Sophia Penn, a lace-maker. His mother could not even sign her name, marking his birth certificate with a simple X, a silent symbol of the illiteracy that shadowed Britain's working poor. The Philby family lived in a small cottage on Swan Lane, a place of stability though not of comfort. Ephraim worked long hours for little pay, while Sophia and her daughters made lace at home, earning pennies by the piece. Even young George helped, winding bobbins and learning the delicate craft by the dim evening light. By the 1861 census, George was listed as a scholar, though education in those days was irregular and secondary to survival. Children often skipped lessons to help with harvests, lacework, or the care of younger siblings. This was the harsh reality of rural life. Every hand, no matter how small, had to contribute. But by the time he turned 12, George's life had already taken a darker turn. In June 1869, he stood before the magistrates, charged with game trespass, essentially poaching or entering private lands to hunt. He was sentenced to 2 months in prison, his childhood replaced overnight by confinement. In those days, crossing onto a lord's hunting grounds, picking up a pheasant egg, or catching a rabbit could bring jail time. For poor families, those same acts could mean food or survival. As the years passed, George's name appeared repeatedly in the court records. By 1872, when the prison photograph that still survives was taken, he was already a known offender. He was punished multiple times for poaching, assault, and using a dog to hunt game, and later for stealing fowls. Each offence was small, yet together they painted the picture of a man locked in constant struggle with a system that criminalised poverty. In 1874, George was fined under the excise laws for shooting game without a licence, an enormous sum for a farm labourer. And in 1876, the same year he married Mary Ann Mortimer at the age of 19, he faced several new convictions, including willful damage and egg stealing on the Rothschild estate. Marriage did little to settle him. His defiance against authority only deepened. Throughout the late 1872, George's arrests multiplied. He trespassed, hunted with ferrets, cut fences, and traded blows with gamekeepers. Newspapers began referring to him by his nickname Dicky Bird, after a keeper shouted it during one of his arrests. This moniker stuck, and in the Habitual Criminals Register, it was officially recorded alongside his real name. By the early 1882, George's crimes escalated. He was caught lying in wait near pheasant pens, pretending to be asleep when discovered. During one trial in 1882, it emerged that his wife had left him, living separately with relatives because she could no longer bear the financial strain and constant trouble. George himself admitted to the police that he had no home to return to, sleeping instead in the fields. Yet even as his life unravelled, his family quietly held together behind him. The 1881 census shows his wife Mary Ann, still young, living with George's ageing parents, caring for their 2 small sons, and working as a straw pliter to feed them. By 1883, George faced his most serious charge yet, stealing 16 tame pheasants, for which he received 9 months in prison. Soon after, he was convicted of burglary, adding another 3 months to his sentence. The following year came his downfall. Convicted of stealing nearly 200 pheasant eggs, he was sentenced to 2 years' hard labour, with the court citing 16 prior offences dating back to his boyhood. When he was finally released, George seemed determined to change course. The 1891 census finds him back with Mary Ann and their children in Chartridge, working once again as an agricultural labourer. For a time, it appeared that he had reclaimed a measure of peace, a husband and father rebuilding his life after years of chaos, but the past would not let him go. The Habitual Criminals Register records another conviction for larceny in 1899, and yet another for game trespassing in 1902, by which time he was in his mid-40s and had accumulated an astonishing 19 prior convictions. After that, the trail in Buckinghamshire goes cold. It seems George left the countryside behind for good. The 1911 census reveals the final chapter of his life. He and Mary Ann were now living in Blaenavon, South Wales, a coal mining town far from their rural origins. There, among the smoke and slag heaps, they raised what was left of their large family, 11 children in total, though 3 had died. It was a quieter, humbler life. George had traded the fields and hedgerows of his youth for the hard labour of industrial Britain. He died on the 26th of February 1919, aged 62, and was buried in Blaenavon. From a boy imprisoned for stealing birds to an old man laid to rest in a Welsh mining town, George Dickie Bird. Philby's life tells the story of a generation, men and women, trapped between the demands of survival and the punishments of a rigid, unforgiving society. His name may have been recorded in the ledgers of criminals, but behind those lines lies a deeper truth. A man born poor, fighting his whole life against a world stacked against him.